Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Maine Take. My name is Dana Connors. I'm pleased to be the host of today's program, brought to you by the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. Today, with the help of our guests, as we always do, we're going to take a look at some of the issues, ideas at work in our state, helping to improve the lives and the livelihood of Maine people, as well as move our economy forward. But today, we're going to take a look at the national level and its impact on Maine, because clearly this person and what they're doing brings tremendous benefit to our state, and I'm happy to share it with all of you. Let me begin by indicating a bit about today's program. It's about really, as I mentioned, the U.S. Senate, but it's really more about the Appropriations Committee, because it's one of the oldest and most powerful committees in the U.S. Senate. It really talks about and decides how much money is going to be spent, where it's going to be spent, and that can be from everything from national defense to biomedical research. Now, our guest today became a part of appropriations, as I remember, and I hope I remember this correctly, in 2009, and since that time has been a chair of a number of the subcommittees dealing with appropriations, a part of the appropriations process. But when the 118th came to be just recently, our guest today is now the vice chairperson of the U.S. Senate Appropriations Committee. By now, you know who I'm talking about. It's our Senator Susan Collins. And Senator, thank you so much for being with us. It's a real delight.
Thank you, Dana. It's always great to join you. I can't imagine the Maine Take without you.
That too is very kind. It's we do a podcast, and when people don't have to focus on seeing you, it's so much easier. But when that camera's in front of you, all your little idiosyncrasies come to bear, and it's more difficult, I must confess. But before I ask you that first question, I also want to make note of something that I think is historic, because it's the first time ever that the 4 Republican and Democratic leaders of the Senate and the House Appropriations Committees are all women, and they all have a great relationship with one another. That is historic. That's wonderful.
It really is. I am really enjoying the opportunity to get to know my 2 House counterparts. I've worked well with Senator Patty Murray for many years, and so already have a relationship there. And making it even more historic, the head of the Office of Management and Budget in the administration is also a woman. So the purse strings are in control of 5 women for the first time in history.
That is simply amazing. But there's a message in that's to be noted, and it's all good. As a matter of fact, bringing it closer to home, Loanne Ballesteros, who's the vice president of Jackson Lab, that you know,
yes,
is chair of our board. Recently, last Friday, as a matter of fact, my replacement was named. That's a woman that lives in Bangor that currently works for the International Trade Center, Julia Muncie. And our vice chair for here at the state chamber that handles all of our advocacy is Linda Caprera. So again, we are the lesser sex for a reason. You can know that for sure. Yeah. Let's jump right in. When I was thinking about our interview today, and first of all, how much of a pleasure it is. This is my last official interview, and who else would I want to have besides Senator Susan Collins? I was thinking, I wonder how many people really understand the appropriations process. There's a number of subcommittees, and then it's brought together, and the overall committee that your vice chair actually makes those final decisions. Am I correct about that?
That's right. Our committee has jurisdiction over all of the federal budget, except for those mandatory entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. But if you're talking about the spending for transportation or education or biomedical research or national defense, that all goes through our committee. And I have been chair or ranking member for a number of years of the subcommittee that had jurisdiction over the Department of Transportation and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Now I will be the chair, or the vice chair, not only of the full committee, but of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee.
Oh, that's incredibly important because of the value that BIW and even the Portsmouth Navy Shipyard bring to our state is without question, and having yourself there is incredibly special. And I also know that from living it, that your role in transportation is clearly to be noted, because getting the sufficient dollars for transportation to replace what inflation has created to their challenges is incredible. We all know how important transportation is in the state of Maine, without doubt. So thank you for that. You know, you're off to, not surprisingly, a great start as vice chair, because I just read recently, I'm going to ask you to speak to it, and the whole program is yours. So take the time you need. You set forth, I recall, 5 priorities that as vice chair you want to see implemented with a sense of priority not to be denied. Share those with us.
Certainly. First of all, I want to try to straighten out the process. Now, I'm not naive, and I know this is going to be difficult, but the fiscal year begins on October 1st. And it has been years since the annual funding bills for departments and programs have been passed on time. And what happens is they get bundled up, as they did in December, into one gigantic bill that is thousands of pages long and is largely negotiated by the chair and vice chair of the Appropriations Committee in the House and the Senate, and the leaders of the House and the Senate. And needless to say, that shuts out a lot of good ideas from the rank and file, and it's given rise to a lot of frustration. But it's also a high stakes poker game, because if that bill doesn't pass, government shuts down, and that represents the ultimate failure. The other option is to pass what we call a continuing resolution, a funding bill that will continue funding government at last year's levels. Now, some people may say, well, what's wrong with that? Wouldn't that save money? It actually costs more money, because you end up delaying the start of needed new programs. Contractors tend to pad their contracts because of the uncertainty and risk involved, and it continues to fund programs that should be trimmed back or eliminated altogether. So it locks in last year's priorities. So straightening out the process, avoiding that year-end do or die bill is an important priority. Second, we really need to keep building up our national defense. Now, obviously, as you pointed out, I have a home state interest here with not only Bath Iron Works and the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, but there's a Pratt & Whitney aircraft engine plant in North Berwick. We have the Defense Accounting Center in Aroostook County in Limestone. We have all sorts of subcontractors all over the state that are making great contributions to our national security. But it should be a wake-up call that the Chinese Navy is now bigger than our Navy. And in order to respond to all the global threats out there, we need to continue to attract people to serve in our armed forces. And there has been a recruitment problem lately and a retention problem as well. And we need to make sure that we are prepared to counter threats from both China and Russia. A third long-standing priority of mine is biomedical research. We've increased the budget for the National Institutes of Health by about 58% since 2015. We need to keep on that trajectory because there's no investment that pays more dividends to our families than the investment in biomedical research. I'm particularly interested in boosting funding for Alzheimer's disease and diabetes, both problems in our state. You mentioned transportation, and as a former commissioner, you know how important it is for our residents in our state, for safety, and for business opportunity. And this goes beyond just roads and bridges. When we look at infrastructure now, we have to think about broadband. I was one of 10 senators who negotiated the big infrastructure bill that's going to make a real difference. And it also has $65 billion to expand broadband access to rural America. Another very important priority, which won't surprise you since we're both from the county, is rural development. If you look at our agricultural, our forest products, and our fishing industries, they are still mainstays of our economy. And we've got to make sure that they have the support that is needed, particularly since they are often the mainstay of a rural community in Maine. Those are some of my priorities. There are others like workforce development. I can't talk to an employer, whether large or small, who isn't desperate for more employees. And I've got some very specific ideas in the healthcare space, but also in allowing asylum workers who come through legal ports of entry and pass a 30-day screening period to go to work. They want to work, they want to support their families, and employers are desperate to hire them.
Not surprising, but those priorities really hit every single note of concern that you find within our state, whether it is the biomedical, whether it's the workforce, transportation. I think you hit them all. So you're in your leadership role, and knowing you as I do, I think we can, notwithstanding the fact you have to get the votes, but we've seen you do that before. So we not only wish you the best of luck, we do so with really applause, because those are issues not to be denied right here in our state. And I'm sure throughout the country, if you really look closely at them. So no, it's great. You brought up something that I do not want to not discuss, and that is you were instrumental in those first year, it seems like years, but it was months of the pandemic in which that Paycheck Protection Program was a lifesaver. And then it was followed up with the infrastructure. And in most states, particularly in Maine, infrastructure plays such an important role. Whether it's, the things that you mentioned, from broadband to the traditional transportation, but other aspects of transportation. And you have been a champion for Maine when it comes to earmarks. And when I was reviewing some of the information that I had or was able to obtain about this interview, it was remarkable the number of projects that you've been able to bring home outside the norm. Can you share with us some of those? Because I think they're so encouraging. We get caught up in our own world and sometimes we don't take note of it. Here's an opportunity.
Just this past week, I was in Bradford outside of Bangor, and I was able to secure close to $2 million to help them build a new fire station that will replace a 175-year-old fire station that's structurally unsound, that is actually dangerous to the people who are volunteering and working there. And the town is providing funding as well. We always want to see a match. And that feels really good to me. I have been able in this last bill to secure funding for 180 projects all over the state. And that amounts to $308 million. And they range from childcare projects to healthcare, to training dental assistants, to helping out the Ys in Maine, to also, I would mention 27 towns will receive funding that helps them with either a new or renovated police or fire or EMS building. And that makes such a difference to them. It allows people to live there. It allows them to provide the public safety that they need. In another 21 towns, I was able to secure funding that it helps them improve the quality of their water systems and their wastewater systems. And again, the local communities are contributing. And it's important to know a couple of things about these earmarks. First of all, they only go to nonprofit organizations or to a community, a county, or a state. So they don't go to a for-profit organization. But if you have a good water system, if you have access to broadband, if you have a good police station, fire department, EMS service, a business is more likely to locate there and create good jobs. And so there's a definite link to economic vitality. The second important point is that these congressionally directed spending projects, as we now call them, do not increase the overall budget. The question is, who decides where the money goes? Should it be someone who works in a high-rise building for the Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, who's never been to the state of Maine? Or should it be those of us who represent the state and know virtually every inch of it? And I would argue that we can make better decisions on how the money can be allocated than some well-meaning but not informed federal employee who's looking at a bunch of applications. We put our projects through a rigorous vetting system to make sure that they are worthwhile. But I'm really proud of what we've been able to get. And I know that it really makes a huge difference. Everything from in Harrison, a food bank that I secured funding for, to Auburn, the police department has a community center where children can go after school, which is the time they're most likely to get in trouble is after they're out of school and before the parents get home from work. So it's exciting to be part of this. And I know that it makes a real difference.
Oh, indeed it does. You know, there was a time when earmarks, maybe called by a different name, really weren't necessarily of the highest priority, a lot of criticism. But what you just outlined does a number of things. There is a rigorous process. It's determined by those who really know, not who think they know. And they all do wonderful things. There wasn't a single thing that you mentioned or that I read that didn't have value or priority or a sense of urgency within that community. So thank God for earmarks, even though years ago they were not well respected. Boy, they sure are today. And thank you for that. I know you probably have a limited time and I can't imagine you didn't, but if you've got just a moment or two, I wanted to ask this question in kind of a different way, in a different context, perhaps. But, you know, it was, I think in 2013, I was asked to be part of, we were part of Making Maine Work, Laura the Chance and myself, and it was an initiative we brought forward. And we did from time to time reports. And at the time we did one on early childhood care and education. And at that time, it was more, it had economic value, it had developmental advantages, but it was still seen as kind of a social program, for lack of a better description. Today, oh my God, it's so associated with workforce and housing of the same nature that it's hard to break that that cycle that we're dealing with workforce without acknowledging it requires childcare, it requires housing. Are you finding that to be what you're hearing as well from a lot of your constituents? Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a real shortage of childcare providers in our state. And I'm finding that that's a barrier to people getting back into the workforce. Affordable housing is another real barrier that Bath Iron Works keeps talking to me about. They've attracted people from out of state to move to Maine who want to work for Bath Iron Works, but they can't find affordable housing and they can't find childcare. I personally lost an employee in York County who had worked for me for 11 years, has 2 young children. Her childcare decreased the number of hours. Her husband commutes to Boston every day, so he doesn't have flexibility. And she finally said to me, Senator, I've loved working for you for 11 years, but I just can't do it anymore with 2 preschool children. And that is a shame because she loved her job and did a good job. But I hear that kind of story a lot. So there's some good news. I was able, for example, to get some funding for some of the Ys in the YMCAs in Maine that are expanding their healthcare, their child care programs. In the Katahdin region, I was able to get some funding that will go for childcare that will allow them to double the number of families that they can serve. So it can make a real difference. I think what we most need to do, and we did get an increase in the end of the year appropriations bill, is we need to increase the funding for the child care development block grant program. And we also need to look at increasing the eligibility levels for income for parents who are eligible for that voucher assistance. That voucher allows them to go where they want and helps them afford the child care. I personally think that over the next 5 years, we need to double the funding for that program, not reinvent the wheel, but use that existing program. And I think it would make a big difference along with the selected earmarks that I can get here and there. But it's a big problem. You're absolutely right.
Senator, I'd love to have you the rest of the afternoon because there's so much we could talk about, and you're so helpful in having us understand not only what the issue is, the challenge may be, but the solution to it. You're so much front and center on that is remarkable in so many ways. But I don't want you to leave without acknowledging something I think is very important for people to hear. And by now, even though we both come from the county, it's not why I'm saying what I'm going to say or repeating for your benefit what I'm going to say, because too often we miss things that are obvious and it needs to be pointed out. I'm saying this and sharing this, I guess, principally because of how you distinguished yourself over the course of years. You were first elected in 1996, and today you rank 8th out of 100 in the Senate seniority, and is the most senior Republican woman. You're the first Republican woman to be elected to a 5th term, the first Republican woman to be vice chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, and the first Mainer to be vice chair of the Appropriations Committee in nothing less than 82 years.
That's true.
That is remarkable. And I think only Susan Collins could say that and accomplish that. So again, I said it before, I'll say it again. I'd love to have you on for the rest of the afternoon because there's so much to talk about, but I also know that I have an obligation to kind of let you go. But I would ask you to stay on for just 1 or 2 more minutes because I kind of like to wrap it up. We have the takeaway, which I don't do very well, but it gives me a chance to reflect a bit on what our guest has had the opportunity to share with us. And let me say this about today's program. and my comments, my takeaway, I should say, that it's short on length perhaps, but it's very long on sincerity and appreciation, Senator Collins, for all you have accomplished for our state, our people, our economy. And for all of that, we can't thank you enough. But I'm going to add to that because in your very unique and very special leadership role as vice chair that you now occupy, and when you think and reflect on the 5 priorities that you just shared with us and know their relevance to our needs in the state, I can guarantee there's much more success to come. But I also know you well enough, because you are important and I am a fan, that what won't wane will be your continued attention and commitment to your constituents. That has been the hallmark of your service, unmatched in so many ways. Particularly noteworthy is all of this is occurring today in a world in which divisiveness and extremism is so apparent. But those of us in Maine know that you stand above the rest. So there is much to thank you for. I'm humbled and proud to be able to call you a friend, and grateful to have this opportunity today to say so, and to have you as my official last interview on the Maine Take. Senator Susan Collins, on behalf of all of us, thank you.
Thank you, Dana. You will be missed.
Wow.
You're a dear friend.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that, my friends, is the show for today with a very special guest, Senator Collins, and I will end it in the way that I always do. In a world where you can be anything, be kind to yourself and be kind to one another. With that, thanks. I've enjoyed having you a part of my life and on Maine Take, and I look forward to seeing you very, very soon. Take care.